Hello, automotive industry. I am Kelly Kleiman with Mr. Fantastic, who in his alias occupation is none other than Car Motivators coach Reed Richards. You are tuned into the Car Motivators Who's Happening in Automotive webcast. And today we have the opportunity to chat with Gerald Bentley, the founder of Dealership Rescue, who also currently doubles as the used car manager for Adams Toyota in Kansas City. He is uniquely qualified for this interview because we are living in a time where used cars are the cars getting sold, and Gerald certainly knows used cars. He also knows how to rescue dealerships because he's been with quite a few. Gerald, thanks for jumping on.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Now, we covered this before our interview, but you're from Cleveland, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Are you a knowledgeable Browns fan?
I am, and it's going to be really interesting. They did the all cards in, all the chips in, and we'll see if it works out because they definitely made themselves a magnet for controversy this year.
Yes, they did. Who are they going to pick in the draft?
I don't know. Hopefully a wide receiver. I mean, you cast your lot with Deshaun Watson, so you're going to have to make them work, right?
Triple down with the receiver. I agree with you 100%. So let's get into it. When COVID hit, how did it affect your business at the dealership? And since you're a processes-focused guy, what processes did you have to adjust to keep selling cars?
Well, the biggest thing we did is, and it was really hugely helpful, about a month before they started really locking things down, putting in stay-at-home orders and going with mask mandates, we went ahead and bought every car we could buy. We went from stocking about 60 or 70 used cars at a time to buying up over 200. And at the time, seemed like maybe they were a little expensive, but ended up, no. We sold every one of them and really wish we would have bought even more. But that initial surge of inventory at least gave us enough to get through the first few months where you were just getting nothing from the factories. That was really the biggest thing we did. And then making a point to tell the salespeople to really double down and figure out what the person actually needs and get towards that, as opposed to just, hey, I want to look at this SUV. You may not have it, so you have to work on switching to something.
Sure. What about a digital retailing solution? Did you have anything implemented, or was it something that you just sort of had to adjust on the fly?
We have it. We have it implemented. We have it in place. It honestly didn't become the huge factor we thought it would be. We really thought it would be a bigger impact than it was. Now, maybe in some parts of the country it was. In Kansas City, the dealerships were still allowed to be open because we were deemed as an essential business. Now, foot traffic obviously dropped to near zero, so virtually every sale was an internet sale driven by a lead, driven by a phone call. But digital retailing, it really only accounted for about maybe 5% of our sales. It was surprising.
That seems to be the number across the board. There's only one group where I've seen it get between 9 and 11%, and that is way up there in Big Sky Country. Well, let's get into Dealership Rescue, and I want to find out what the genesis of it was. Was it a late night epiphany, an accumulation of experiences that culminated in a great idea to serve an underserved and desperately needed niche?
Yeah, it's just something I thought about and I've wanted to get into for a while because there's a huge difference dealership to dealership on how things are managed, right? What the processes are, how they work through things. And having had the chance to work for big groups like Group One, like a Van Tile, Berkshire Hathaway, that, especially with Berkshire Hathaway, that really dig into the analytics, there's things that are just almost no-brainers that should be done everywhere that the vast majority of dealerships just don't do. I mean, even something as simple as, hey, you get to 3 pencils, that's it, it's go time. Because pencil 4, your closing rate is virtually 0. And some dealerships have done the analytics, the big groups, mainly like a van and maybe a Hendrix. Others are just oblivious to it. And getting to see that firsthand, I realized there's really a need for somebody to be able to go in, make a couple of small changes to a dealership without disrupting the whole process and what makes them unique, to just help them out, give them a leg up, change some things that they may not even realize they were doing wrong.
Gerald, if you don't mind sharing, what are maybe your top three?
I think number one is actually doing a customer interview, doing a guest sheet and writing it down. Because if you write something down, you're using multiple senses. It tells the customer that you care, that you're actually listening.
I know you can't see this because it's
Yeah.
so bright, but I swear to you, I was at a dealership in California, April 19th, and I said, can you send me your guest sheet or your customer up sheet? I could share with a dealership in California. He says it's called a guest sheet, LOL. But
Yeah.
he swears he took this dealership from 125 to 450, and he swears all you have to do is implement a guest sheet.
No, I think it's the number one thing you can change.
I like how I'm glad
right
you
off
said
the top,
Gerald.
because you got to think there's a veteran salesperson at every dealership in the country, right? Who says, "Oh yeah, no, I know my customers. I close everybody that's serious." Okay, so you're determining who's serious to buy and who's not. So therefore, the 15% that are serious, you close 100% of the time. That's like Anchorman. That's like the cologne. It works 60% of the time, 30% of the time. It doesn't work. That's number one. Number two, which I think is really important too, and doesn't happen a lot, manager introductions, manager interventions. Just getting up and talking to somebody. Take the pressure off the customer, especially right now. Take the pressure off the customer, off the salesperson, that the salesperson's negotiating the price. They're not. And if you let them, it's probably not going to end well. So get that off of them. Make it really upfront and easy. Hey, my name's Gerald. I'm going to take care of all the pricing and payments for you. Salesman here, Jim, he's got the easy job. He's going to find the right vehicle for you. He'll work with you to make sure it's the right vehicle. Then we'll get it wrapped up. That way you eliminate a lot of the pricing questions up front, so they can just work on the product and get kind of dialed in on it.
That involves a little bit of training.
Sure it does.
So, yeah, let's get into that. So how do you train your salespeople to handle customers in the current economy that has high gas prices and certainly unfriendly financing terms? What kind of education do they have to provide the customer?
Sure. I think one thing is to feel some empathy. I mean, don't hide it. Don't be oblivious to the prices being high. Just go right out and say to the customer, hey, you know what? As soon as they say, wow, these are crazy prices. Hey, I agree. It's crazy. Everything's too expensive. I mean, look, everywhere you go, everything's too expensive, right? Yeah. If you get somebody agreeing with you, you kind of diffuse the objection up front, right? If you bring it up, you give it voice, you can combat it. I think what a lot of people are doing, and when I actually, a couple weeks ago on my podcast, I pointed out that if you're just blindly walking to the end of the sale and then you're going to deal with the pricing at that point, you've probably already lost, because customers aren't listening to dealership podcasts. They're not really focusing on dealership news and what cars are selling for. So if you just assume they know the prices are going to be sky high and everything's over sticker, you're probably failing, because they may not. If you can bring it up and engage in conversation or work through that helps a lot. The other thing I pointed out, which I think a lot of dealerships have gotten away from over the last couple of years because of the COVID restrictions, is really taking some time to walk around the car, maybe even go on a test drive, because as part of COVID restrictions, you weren't going down the test drives, you were BCA in the car. Dig back in and really point out and sell the vehicle. Find on your guest sheet the 2 or 3 things that are the single most important thing to the customer, and then just talk about those. Let them drive and relax. because that's going to be your key. The other podcast I just did, talking about setting up your finish, because right now you're getting one shot at a customer. You probably don't have many cars. You don't have much coming in. Your one shot is your best shot. So before you get into it too much, you need to know what your finish is. How do you end it? What ends the sale? My analogy was Ric Flair, every match he had, if he won it, he was winning it with the figure 4 leg lock. That was the whole set to get to that. So figure out what your finish is. Maybe with this customer, it's high fuel economy and good safety and being within their payment range. All information you would have got from the guest sheet. From that point on, every single thing you say should be targeted to those 3 things, not to the price. Price doesn't sell cars. If it did, Mitsubishi would be the #1 brand in America. And it's not.
Essentially, they're telling you what they want to buy and how they're going to buy it. So you want
Sure.
to double down on their wishes. Cue Pat Benatar on taking your best shot. If you had to, now this is actually really quite important, because it does deal with being able to train people. I mean, what's the culture like in your dealership, right? So if you had to identify the biggest issue facing a dealership, how high up on the list would culture be, and what can be done to turn that around, since there's so many different personalities and egos and attitudes involved?
Well, I mean, having a positive culture, I think, is really high on the list, because otherwise you get everyone afraid of their own shadow. You ask somebody to change, and if there's not buy-in from the top, as soon as they change something and it fails, you're going to remember, and the top people are going to remember the one thing that failed, and we're good. We're good with doing what we're doing.
Mm.
And it really makes no sense. Here at a dealership that I worked at previously, I was told by the former owner, hey, it's just a slow market. Everything's going to rebound. Well, hey, do you consider the dealership a mile down the road your competition? Well, sure we do. Yeah. Okay. It wasn't a slow market for them. They outsold you 3-1.
Right.
So it wasn't a slow market. It wasn't this excuse. It's truly just locking in, working each customer one at a time, and having a commitment that you're going to follow a process to drive it to a sale. You can make excuses for anything. I mean, every team that loses, you can do the post-game interviews, and there's it just wasn't a good day. I didn't have my curveball. Yeah, we had some untimely penalties. There were a few injuries. All those sports analogies translate into sales too. If you've been at dealerships on a bad day or a bad month where the sales didn't total out to where they thought they were going to be, you'll hear every kind of excuse. Oh, hey, you know what? There was a parade today in Seven Hills. They had a big high school football game last night. It's prom at this school. It's tax-free weekend. There's an excuse for every single day of the year.
Yeah.
And at the end, it just doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
Yeah. Well, Reed, you do quite a bit of coaching. You could train someone to close in a particular manner. You could train them how to use the technology that's on hand, and that's another question that I wanted to get into. But
my philosophy is just like Gerald's. I believe in a heavy TO situation. As a salesperson, I want to have that energy taken away. I want to be able to do my job, find the right vehicle for you. I want a reverse TO by my manager, and I want my manager to interject and say that he's going to go ahead and take care of the pricing. So that way I don't have to deal with it. You know, that's key to me as far as handling that customer. And I don't think that it's any different with COVID, without COVID, with volume, without volume. It's the same mentality. If they drive it and they don't like it, they're not going to buy it. But they're going to buy something. So if you can create a flexible customer, one that might be interested in something similar with a little bit of miles on it that might save them some money, create a reason to benefit in the mind of why they would want to switch, the art of selling, I think Gerald mentioned earlier. It's the same thing. That's the thing, is we haven't developed the skill set from over the past 100 years that's necessary for us to do our jobs the right way. So now we're being, slowly turned into artificial intelligence.
Well, and willingly being dragged along in some cases, because here's something that absolutely drives me crazy. In multiple dealerships, go in, salesperson, and they go, oh, I don't want to waste my time with the customer. What?
Yeah.
You're in a dealership. That hours aren't what they used to be, but still, let's say you're there from 9 to 6, or you're there from noon to 8. If you wait on 4 customers a day, if it goes really long, that's a total of 4 hours. There should never be a sentence that ends with the phrase waste of time or time waste. There isn't one.
Right.
And if you just dial in and really, really lock in with the customer, figure out what's important to them, why they came there, why you, and show them that you are valuable, that you are worth it, you're 3/4 of the way there already. Here, an analogy that I give a lot. Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton has 11 stores in a 4-mile circle on the Vegas Strip. They're all on straight commission. And you go into one of those stores, be it at the Bellagio, the Wynn, Caesars, and any of them, doesn't matter. You're going to get great service, a great introduction. The salesperson's going to ask you where you're from, why are you there, what's going on, what are you trying to find? And when you share that with car salespeople, their response is, oh, well, sure, that's Louis Vuitton. It's a luxury brand. Okay, true. But you're buying a $1,000, $2,000. The most expensive thing you can buy is a $4,000 purse. Your cheapest car is 5 times as much as that. It shouldn't be an excuse. You should be that much better. And
Totally
getting
agree.
people to accept that is a huge part of it. When you buy into that as a sales rep, you're going to make a lot more money. It just happens.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. We were just this summer, we were at a Louis Vuitton store in Palm Springs, and I was amazed at how professional the salespeople were. They were very good. And I thought, this should translate well to the car industry.
Sure.
And it does with the super luxury dealers, but for the standard model, anywhere from $22,000 to $52,000 vehicles, it's not as much emphasized. Which you brought up a point, and that's utilizing the time that you have to utilize your time with, and it's a matter
Sure.
of efficiency and such. Do you find that the average sales and even the service personnel don't utilize the tools that they're given, not only to build their books of business, but retain business as well? And I mean also from technology, from lead gathering, lead following up, things along those lines?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think you can go and find at many, many dealerships, you can find things in the CRM that aren't being used. Here, something as simple as this. Making follow-up calls that are assigned in a CRM. Guys will sit there and they'll hammer away on phone calls at like 10:30 to 11:30, and then 2:00 in the afternoon to 4, because there's probably not going to be many customers in the dealership, so I'll make all my phone calls then. And then they'll make the same phone calls the next day and the day after, if they're making them at all. Well, the problem is, if somebody's calling me between 10:30 and 11:30 or 2 and 4, it's getting my voicemail. It's probably coming across as spam likely. I'm never going to see it. I'm never going to listen to it. You accomplished nothing. You never reached the person. You did nothing. So something as simple as blocking your phone calls in time. And I think, Reed, you have something very similar to this.
Yes.
Block it in time from 9 to 10. So maybe they're just getting to work. From noon to 1:30, on lunch, just leaving. 4:30 to 5:30. They should be getting off work, wrapping up the day. You may get a chance to catch the person. And then on Saturdays, don't make a call after 10:30 because the people are probably gone anyways. But the result of that is salesmen won't do that. They'll hammer the phone calls from 11 to 1, say, oh, nobody answers them anyways. Why do I even make them? And then they're done because they were given a ton of tasks. They don't believe there's any value in it. And they tried and it was a failure. So they're out. And that's just one example.
Over and over.
There's many more. Let's discuss vendors because.
Well, how do you approach that issue?
Try to just push and hammer in. Hey, you make the phone calls at times that people will answer them. The rest of the day, get text messages. Business cards. I believe business cards are dead. Every time I see somebody with a business card, I want to go grab them and throw them away.
You know what I call those? Business cards?
Exit tickets.
Close. They're dismissal slips.
Yeah, sure.
Last
What they should do, the customer's there already. They got a cell phone. Hey,
Yeah, right.
let me do this. I'm going to send you, and if you have a CRM that has an opt-in, it's fine. It works. I'm going to send you an opt-in text right now. Just reply back yes. Now you have my contact information right there. Any questions you have, anything you need, as soon as you text it back, I can see it and I can get it straight to my manager so we can get you an answer instantly. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Way better than a business card.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have to keep hammering salespeople to do that? You could, like I said, you could train them to do it. We know it's best practices, but it always feels like there needs to be an ongoing process. How many texts did you put out today? I mean, do you have to literally keep track of them on a sheet, on a database? It's because it works. It really does.
Yeah. I don't know if you necessarily need a sheet or to track the numbers because sometimes the numbers don't have value, but do you have to keep it going all the time? Sure. Yeah. Is there a reason why Bill Belichick still coaches the New England Patriots? They should know everything.
Yeah.
No, they spend hours. Bill Self just took the Jayhawks down the road to a national title, and I guarantee you they work relentlessly at the same high-low offense over and over and over and over again. You have to get really, really good at what you're doing. And I think what you find too is if you go into most dealerships, the top person is also probably the person that is the most diligent, is the most scheduled, is the most repetitive. They're doing what they do because they know this process works. Tom Brady doesn't go into the huddle, even though he calls his own offense. He doesn't go into the huddle just saying, okay, guys, let's swing it. I mean, it doesn't happen. He knows what he wants to do. And then you have to make some adjustments. Sure. But you have to have a plan and you have to be able to execute it and make it repeatable. That's true in every sport. It's true in really any kind of sales too.
Well, let's discuss vendors because I've noticed that others in the rescue business tend to do a heavy analysis of the vendor slate, and they tend to blow out most of the vendors and I would say that they blow them out over any department. I'll give you an example. Brian, do you know Brian Sanchuk? He's a Clevelander also. He was hired. Yeah, he was hired by Ford, and he would go into dealerships and he would do the vendor analysis, and inevitably he would blow every one of them out. And he did find that some of them were actually paying the GM a little big on the side.
Sure.
So what does your analysis look like when you go in and you analyze the vendors?
You know, I think a lot of them, honestly, right now are about the same. I really do. The biggest thing is you should be using one that actually interacts well with your DMS. The DMS isn't going anywhere. Almost all the vendors now are on month-to-month contracts. If you have a vendor that doesn't work well with your DMS, you're setting yourself up to fail, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't have a desking tool, then by nature, you're not going to present multiple options and there's still tremendous amount of dealerships that don't use the desking tool. They're doing Sharpies and Foursquares. Well, if you're doing a Sharpie and a Foursquare, by nature, you're presenting one option. So you don't have the numbers to negotiate with. I mean, you just don't. So I don't really think the specific vendors are all that important because There's lots of good CRMs. Bin Solutions is good. eLead is good. Dealer-Centric is good. For inventory management, VinQ is good. vAuto is good. You need something though in each block. You don't want to be posting your own used car inventory yourself. That's a really bad idea. I'm sure there's some dealerships that are still appraising their trades using Black Book. That's just a Black Book in their hand. That's a bad idea. So you have to have something. What I've noticed is a bigger problem actually is dealerships that have ran through multiple consultants and said, yes, 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 and just bought everything because they figured their equipment, their vendors, that was the problem. Didn't change anything. I went to one dealership and said, hey, you know what? It would be really good if you had an equity mining program because your service department does a great job. But sales, you're last in the city. That doesn't make sense. There's an imbalance. So there should be a way to get the service customers that already like you to come in and buy cars. And they said, oh, sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Well, as it turns out, they had an equity mining program that worked just fine. Naked Lime, it's a good program, great tool. They had it for a year. They were selling 4 or 5 cars a month with Naked Lime by accident because they automatically sent out 300 emails. They didn't even know it. So just turning that on instantly added 25 cars a month. So that's been the bigger problem, is either not having one of those cogs to your digital wheel, or having it and just not even realizing it was turned on, or not having somebody on top of it. Another dealership, they signed up for a company, a CRM, that does automated follow-up emails, which, there's not a great deal of value to it, but, occasionally somebody probably answers one. Their problem was they didn't send any other emails because they said, hey, we got this system. It's doing all of our emails. It's handled. It was handled except the from email in the setup when the company set it up was misspelled. So until we logged in and saw it, they actually didn't send an email to a customer in a year and a half.
Gerald, I'll tell you what, that dealership I was working for in California, they have been paying for dealer socket since 2014.
And not using it.
And I was just on another store with the General Motors situation where General Motors offers call recording opportunity through MarchX for all their dealerships for free. And they get probably 8 to 10 calls a day on dealership reps from MarchX calling MarchX to try to, because the dealership didn't even know they had it.
Yeah.
The services. But
that's what I'm saying. It's
in that that's because they don't use them. So when you mentioned when you try to help sales and service push, well, you mentioned that you approach the issue through pushing. So how do you approach your sales training for where you could not have to push all the time?
Oh, your salespeople can be they should be your single best asset, right? I mean, a coach doesn't win the game, the players win the game. So if the salespeople see success, they feel that, wow, hey, we're going on the right page. You'll find that things that work will be followed, right? And if you can ask somebody to do, instead of to do a ton of things at once, okay, hey, you need to do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. If you ask somebody to do a lot of things at once, they're going to do none. If you ask somebody to do a little bit of something that's really important, hey, can you do this too? Hey, let's do this. Ask for a lot of little things, you'll get a lot more results than one big thing, which is where I think some of the groups do get a little bit off, because the numbers, I'm sure, don't lie, that if your sales rep makes 100 phone calls a day, sends 50 texts, sends 50 emails, they'll be the most successful because on the numbers, hey, that's going to get the most returns. Sure. But
they'd
if
sell
you
about
go
44 cars, right?
Yeah. If you go from doing nothing to telling them, okay, hey, now you got to make 100 phone calls, 50 texts, and 50 emails, they're going to respond by half-heartedly doing it. If you don't have click to call, you're kidding yourself, because those phone calls aren't being made.
Yeah, it takes
And
26
hammer out
clicks.
50 emails.
Yeah, 26 clicks to get from one client to the next client.
Yeah. So time, you're just not there. If somebody's saying, okay, yeah, I made 50 phone calls and it's been an hour, they didn't.
So you kind of like break up and look for a little bit at a time.
Yeah, break it into smaller pieces. Have those 3 blocks of the day where you're dedicated to making your calls, unless you have a customer.
Yeah, like a call blitz.
Yeah, and ask for a little bit of something throughout the day. Because if you ask somebody to be a robot and sit there and just sledgehammer phone calls all day, you'll fail.
Yeah. So where do you see the car business in 10 years?
You know what? I think a lot of people thought Carvana, right? If you're listening to the media, Carvana's got it figured out. They're the future. They're going to drive it home. Well, right now they're driving it home to an average gross of negative 3,500 a copy. So unless they're planning to make it up in the volume, that's probably not working, right?
Right. Do you think there'll be a EV in every garage?
I don't know. It's definitely probably going to be trending that way, right? As soon as the costs get down. I think no matter what I think is important is that the death of the dealership has been greatly exaggerated.
Yes.
Because everyone who's tried a flat price has really failed, right?
Not necessarily.
Saturn's not there. No,
Gerald,
some dealerships have.
Gerald,
some dealerships have, but individual brands, it hasn't worked.
Right. Yeah. Think about it though. You mean as far as a manufacturer level?
A manufacturer,
yes.
Saturn.
Fair enough. What do you think then? If that's the case, what about subscription then?
Well, Volvo's trying it,
right?
And you know what? I think on the coast, maybe in Nebraska it's a little bit different, Reed, but in Missouri, in Kansas, it's really hard to get people to lease. On the coast, leases are high. A subscription is just another form of a lease.
Right. Really
so
is. Really
now in time, sure, maybe. I think something that does have to happen is the prices can't keep going up and up and up and up and up. And the car companies are going to have to come out with some more lower priced cars, because a $34,000 average price used car, that's not sustainable. Because what do you do for the 19-year-old living on their own who's just looking to buy a car?
Yeah.
They're not buying a $34,000 car. So the companies all getting away from the entry-level car, that's probably going to have to reverse.
Right.
I mean, you would think, because you're just eliminating a chunk of the market.
There's something instinctively wrong with paying $650 for a basic Altima.
Yeah.
That's just not right on any level. I'll give you my. Yeah.
It's not so bad if you have a 420 credit score. And I mean, there's some situations that might be a great situation.
Sure. You get a yes.
Yeah. I prefer, I lease all my vehicles because I know that I'm getting out in a year or two from the vehicle, and people are like, why don't you buy it? I'm like, well, but then I'm paying interest on the full amount. Why not lease it and only pay for part of the vehicle? And then when I go to trade it, I trade it. Yeah. It doesn't matter if I put the miles on it or not.
Well, so depending on the car you lease, you can get the equity out of it too. I mean, if you leased a Toyota or a Honda, actually right now, if you lease just about anything,
are you biased?
You're in an equity position.
Are you biased?
No, but
Gerald,
having been a GM manager, having been a Dodge Ram Jeep manager,
that's what I have.
It's hard to make one of those lease. You have to want it, because the residuals are just too low. You have to really want it.
Yeah.
You don't lease too many GMs.
Well, let me ask you this in closing as we run out of time here, and that would be, how the heck do you balance the two positions? So you're working with the dealership, and of course you've got your business. How do you rescue dealerships and work your gig?
Well, really what I'm doing right now is just looking to do looking to do online consultations,
Okay.
CRM reviews in cities outside of Kansas City. So
Right.
not in the immediate area. And sales training podcast, sales training videos. So things that are helpful to, I think, anyone. I think lots of the sales training can be super helpful from whoever it's from. Like Damien Boudreau does some great stuff. Grant Cardone, of course. There's lots of really good trainers.
Is Grant Cardone even involved in it anymore, or did he license that?
No, they're pre-recorded videos.
Yeah.
Well, he has his team of trainers, and then I know he's out there because I get emails every day.
If it was a trainer, I just taken a shot on. I would have to say Andy Elliott myself.
Yeah.
If it was a sales situation, I would choose his energy as far as the training goes. But I think you mentioned it earlier, and I'm not pushing this too far, Kelly, is that we found that when you push, you get pushback, right?
Sure.
And the training side of it is, we're constantly always pushing. Well, if we let them build it, they'll own it. If they own it, they'll act on it. And if they don't, they're going to be runners, and they're always going to need to be pushed.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is you don't want to make your plan the enemy of what they do. If you can find things that are small changes that ideally, here, a perfect world, right? The idea that gets implemented the best is yours. If you can work together with that dealership and they believe that, hey, this is a great plan we came up with, there's a lot better chance of it working than if you give them a textbook and say, here you go, do this. Because the immediate reaction, right, if you get anything, is, well, hey, what should I do? I think this could be a little bit different. I could change this a little bit. Well, work together to come up with something that works, because there's plenty of different ways to do something. There's a different sales process at a dealership that's selling used cars in a predominantly second chance market than there is an import dealership in a suburb where the average credit score is 750. Asking somebody to fill out a registration sheet which has a credit application on it would be a pretty bad idea at a dealership where everybody's tier 1 or tier 1 plus. It's a waste, and you're putting customers into bad situations. So there has to be room for adjustment and getting people to feel comfortable with what they're doing. So if you don't, it won't work.
Yeah. Well, Gerald Bentley, founder of Dealership Rescue, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Gerald, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Enjoyed
Best of luck moving forward. Where can you be reached, Gerald?
Well, you can go to our website, dealershiprescue.net. You can find the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Follow them there, and just contact me off the website. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Dealershiprescue.net.
Roger that. Thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.
Folks, that's about all we have for today. I'm Kelly Kleiman. That is Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards. And of course, our guest is Gerald Bentley. Have a great day.
Thanks.